So, dear humans, welcome to our 243rd online gathering for faith leaders across the country. Excuse me, now called Creating Beloved Community. This regular gathering is sponsored by ELCA's coaching ministry. I am Jason O'Neill. I use any and all pronouns, and I'm honored to be one of your facilitators today.
And I am Sylvia Nielsen-Gooden. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm so grateful to be your other facilitator in attunement with the truth and healing movement of the ELCA and moving toward right relationship with our Indigenous siblings and neighbors. We're going to begin with a land acknowledgement. We are gathered together from all parts of Turtle Island, also referred to as North America. We are connected by the breath given us by the breath maker and by the very piece of Mother Earth, the land that each of us inhabits today. We understand that all land is Indigenous land, and we invite each of you to name in the chat the Indigenous peoples or tribal nations whose lands you occupy now. We acknowledge the terror of colonialism, genocide, ethnic cleansing, broken treaties, stolen land, forced removal, and boarding schools, as well as the thousands of missing and murdered Indigenous women and children each year, and the ripple effects of violence still being experienced today. We know that Indigenous peoples are not historical subjects, but are part of our communities. They offer invaluable wisdom for how we exist in relationship with Mother Earth, as well as our human and non-human neighbors. And it is also important for us to offer a labor acknowledgement. So with permission granted by Dr. Terrace Stewart, we acknowledge that much of what we know of this country today, including its culture, economic growth, and development, has been made possible by the labor of enslaved Africans and their ascendants who suffered the horror of transatlantic slave trafficking, slavery, and Jim Crow laws. We are indebted to their labor and their sacrifice, and we acknowledge the tremors of that violence through the generations and the resulting impact that can still be felt and witnessed today.
Another vital part of creating beloved community is fostering a sense of belonging. So we invite you to update your name in Zoom to include your pronouns. This is just one more way we can express welcome for all of God's children. And at any point during these gatherings, you may access captions options in the Zoom menu on your device. It might also show as an icon with the letters CC in a box, or you may need to click on 3 little dots or swipe to a different screen within Zoom to access this option.
So we'll continue our work toward healing and justice by entering into a place of peace and listening together. Let's take a deep breath wherever we are. Through these regular gatherings, we have developed a covenant that we've been using of how we enter and interact in this space. We're committed to creating a safer and braver space where each of us are able to bring the truth of who we are and how we're doing. If you share something today that you wish for us to edit out of the recording, let us know afterwards. And with all of this said, we affirm these conversations are meant to be an intentional step to live more fully into God's dream for us as the body of Christ, the beloved community.
As Bell Hooks wrote in All About Love, rarely, if ever, are any of us healed in isolation. Healing is an act of communion. Today and every second Wednesday of 2025, we will journey with Indigenous author Vine Deloria Jr. and engage with Custer Died for Your Sins, an Indian manifesto. A reminder about our journey together. We are all learning from this Indigenous elder through his writing. So we are not teaching. We are just facilitators in this space each month.
And it feels important to begin our reading circle with this context from the last paragraph of the preface. But the Indian task of keeping an informed public available to assist the tribes in their efforts to survive is never ending. And so the central message of this book, that Indians are alive, have certain dreams of their own, and are being overrun by the ignorance and the mistaken, misdirected efforts of those who would help them, can never be repeated too often. So do you want to share the covenant on the screen, Jason?
Yeah, totally forgot to share slides today, didn't I? I am right on top of things.
Yeah.
There we go.
That.
Mm, mm,
So just a reminder
mm.
um, that the invitation is to share from our head and our heart at the same time. Yeah, I think we've all experienced when we're just speaking from our heads that real damage can be done when we don't engage our hearts and when we aren't aware of the hearts of others that are impacted. We want to practice awareness of time and space. And so we're a small group, so probably not a big issue, but the practicing of the awareness of like stepping up and stepping back and engaging, challenging ourselves to engage more deeply if that's something that's a challenge for us, or to step back and make space for others to do that. And just to always remember that we are always learning, and that is the point. So there's so much grace. This is a space of grace, that is for sure. So we are going to start with gathering the noticings, wonderings, agitations, invitations. So we're going to give ourselves about 5 minutes and invite you to type in quotes from the chapter or from earlier chapters or other resources you're working with that connect. Make sure to include the page number. And but the quotes that you found particularly poignant or agitating or meaningful, whatever. And in about 5 minutes, we'll start inviting people to read their quotes in order so that we can have a variety of voices and hear all of us. So
And
maybe 6 minutes. Go ahead.
to confirm, we're on chapter 9, right?
Oh, yes. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes. All right. Chapter 9. The way I remember is that the chapter coincides with the month. And so it's like, oh, it's September. Okay, I'm on the right chapter. Yeah. Whatever we need. Whatever we need. Okay. Okay. So let's type some quotes into the chat.
noticed our time. Jill, I think you were the first host, if I recall. Do you mind starting us out? I mean, if you're in the middle of typing, you can finish that first.
Nope, I think I was close to being done. There's just so much that this felt like a longer chapter. So it's
Mhm.
like, okay, where to start? Wow, so many great posts. Yeah, page 199, missionaries and government agents worked to undermine the influence of the old people and the medicine men. Indians seemed to drift into a timeless mist. And it just, I have like a grief response happening when I read that, because just remembering everything that Vance has taught us about the sacredness, and to know that there was systematic intention to undermine these souls. Humans have unending capacity to harm one another. That horrifies me.
And then Charlene.
In some ways, we did it unconsciously, which is why I wrote that whole section, put Tonto and put the section in. I mean, how many of us watched The Lone Ranger growing up and cheered and thought this was so great? And we didn't know even then, that what we were doing also was undermining. And yeah. So that's one of the reasons I put that there. For me, it's just such a reminder of, again, how we were so much, all of us, part of this.
So I started from the back of the chapter and went backwards. Indian unity is what the churches mean when they say brotherhood, but which they dare not practice. It is what the white man seeks in his fraternities and exclusive clubs.
Yeah. Did you hear one of the latest statements by somebody from, I don't know if he was a senator or whatever? He flat out said, America's only for white people. And somebody commented on it and said, boy, they're not hiding any. Oh, Joy Reid commented on it and said, they're not hiding anything now. But oh my gosh, that you would dare say that out loud, knowing it was going to get reported and everything. But what that says to all the folks who are here. Oh.
And then Charlene, you and I put the same quote from page 210. The funny thing about this era was that one subject was absolutely forbidden,
Yeah.
and that was any attempt to compare the white man's treatment of Indians with that of other minority groups.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't think we can forget that. And it's hard sometimes, because even wasn't it the beginning of the chapter that talked about, as we recognize more like the quote, what we called civil rights in those days, and stuff, that other things went by the wayside. So, yeah.
Oh, you're muted, Solveig.
So it's kind of a long one, but it's the very last paragraph of the chapter.
Yeah.
As Indians, we will never have the efficient organization
Right.
that gains great concessions from society in the marketplace. We will never have a powerful lobby or be a smashing political force. But we will have the intangible unity which has carried us through 4 centuries of persecution, and we will survive. We will survive because we are a people unified by our humanity, not a pressure group unified for conquest. And from our greater strength, we shall wear down the white man and finally outlast him. But above all, and this is our strongest affirmation, we shall endure as a people.
I think I need to cut that out and put it somewhere where I can read it, especially on the days when I have no hope.
Mhm, mhm.
And I noted from page 198, the simple sentence public opinion was fickle because I think it still is or always is, maybe. It doesn't feel like was to me.
No.
Yeah, this one's such a comment on us, on America right now. America is certainly not a democracy when it is controlled by pressure groups. Rather, it is a pressure cooker waiting to explode when the wrong ingredients come together.
That's what we are. Yeah.
Yes.
I chose to highlight the rise to popularity of Will Rogers, the Cherokee humorist. And the reason I did that is because I remember quite vividly that my parents were fans of his. And until reading this at this time, I didn't realize that he was Indigenous.
Hmm.
And I wonder whether my parents did. And whether they would have had the same reaction if they had known. Because I suspect they didn't. I also chose a quote about Tonto. Tonto was a cultureless Indian for Indians and an uncultured Indian for whites. That was mind-breaking for me. Huh. Same person, different perspectives. And then from page 203, Deganawada had forged the Great Iroquois Confederacy out of a miscellaneous group of refugee tribes who had been driven out of the Missouri-Arkansas area in the 15th century. So I've heard about the Iroquois Confederacy forever, but I didn't ever hear that their original territory was not the northeastern United States. All these things out of history that we miss.
And Alice, the thing about that strikes me is the timing of that. I don't think about this terrible movement happening, I don't know, like before the later 1700s. And so to hear that marker on the calendar, it saddens me even more. That just immediately, as soon as white people laid eyes on the land, it started.
Well, actually, I think this predates white people coming. The 15th century, and it was not done specifically by white people. It says by the stronger Osage and Quapaw tribes. So I'm not sure, but I think it might have been prior to.
There, I don't
We can
know if I can find the quote. I'll look for it, but it's so I think that's a learning for me, like a real growing edge for me, is how to talk about how to respond when people say, well, people have been, Indians were fighting each other before the white people got here, right? I mean, just that like blanket, it doesn't matter. It just happens that, we won, right? But in here, he talks about a different kind of warring, and why, nations would fight against nations. And anyway, maybe I can see if I can find that. But it was, I want to get more articulate about talking about that so I can respond, to that sort of,
dismissal.
And it hadn't even occurred to me that this could be another example of that. The surprising thing to me was just that we hadn't heard about history prior to the white people coming. The indigenous people, as he says, I think in this chapter, or maybe I've been trying to play catch up because I've missed so many. He talks about how they don't need written history because they have their storytellers that keep all the important history from the past. And we white people depend on the written. And if it's not written in a sense, it didn't happen for us. So.
And then Charlene, you had noted a quote from page 224.
Sorry. I forgot which one because I can't see it right now.
Oh, do you want me to read that?
Sure.
We will survive because we are a people unified
Yeah.
by our humanity, not a pressure group unified for conquest.
Yeah. 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 The difference between,
Mm-hmm.
because it's conquest right now by us, quote. So,
Are you next, Jill?
Yeah, and thank you for inviting me. So page 202, contemporary Indian leadership was suppressed by tales of the folk heroes of the past. And this really caught my attention just because of something that we just said before, that Indigenous peoples historically kept history by sharing stories and passing it down orally, right? And I feel like in our contemporary churches, we're starting, in fact, I just read a couple of invitations to attend like evangelistic narrative storytelling events, right? Like learn to give your testimony, and just the conflation of that and the danger of that, just because of what Jason posted, right? That public opinion is so fickle. And we live in this insane time where there are so many versions of the truth. And, I can say with confidence that I know what's true, right? And that other space is wrong. But I just feel like I don't know. I just wanted to highlight that and just say that feels like a big hot mess. And today
Mm-hmm.
it does. And how easy it would be to manipulate by and in that time, it sounds like that was happening, right? The manipulation. We'll just tell this other tale, discredit them. And maybe that's again as old as time. Oh, we'll just start this rumor about this person. Anyway, just grab my attention.
Or just call it a hoax.
yeah.
Um, yeah. Let me welcome John Otto. So my quote is from page 221. And it just reminded me so much about Jesus' Sermon on the Mount or on the plain. Indians welcome the future, but don't worry about it. Traditionally, the tribes had pretty much what they wanted. There was no reason to get uptight about wealth and its creation. The land had plenty for everyone.
Mm.
Piling up gigantic surpluses implied a mistrust of the Great Spirit and a futile desire to control the future.
Mm. Yeah.
It reminds me of the that parable about the building bigger barns, and Jesus' response, or God's response to that, to the builder, is, "You fool."
Yeah.
And I just, when I preached on it, it was just like, I was just like, okay, I just have to say this, everybody. What this landowner did about like building bigger barns and like say, so we call that like prudent fiscal planning. That's what we call it. We call that responsible. We call that like good Christian being responsible, good stewards. With that is what we call that. God calls that foolish. What the hell? What do we do with that? We got to just sit with that. Anyway, okay, but it just, that quote was just like that's what Jesus was saying. Hello, people. But it's also like it's a worldview, but it's a worldview shaped by by the garden.
Mm.
When you've been removed from the garden, and then resources are scarce, it's very difficult to keep that trust, that faith in Great Spirit, that there actually is enough. And I can see, how easy it is to lose it, to lose that worldview and that way of being.
I noted from page 199, the status of the Indian became a nebulous question which seemed familiar and important, but for which there was apparently no answer. And then Charlene, you had noted from page 206.
Just that phrase, given what is happening nowadays. Suspect and respect go hand in hand in Indian affairs. That's, gosh, if we could just follow that, right? We don't put respect with success.
Mm-hmm.
At least our country leadership doesn't, but. So just a reminder, a goal.
A hope.
Oh, that's, yes.
A dream, a wish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, the quote that I put from 210 comes just ahead of another paragraph that was quoted a couple of times. And I'll just read this short paragraph. It would curl your hair to learn that the white man had perpetuated a colonial system, that he had done all sorts of irrational things to Indians, then made an about-face and tried to atone for the past in order that his ancestors might sleep peacefully. Although this is what these conferences produced, we have yet to experience white atonement.
Mm. Yeah.
What does true atonement look like? That's the coaching question that comes to my heart. What does true atonement look like?
Sorry.
Mm.
I don't think people generally atone for when they don't see what sin they've committed. You don't atone for something that you don't feel guilty of.
And a lack of understanding, right? And that's one of the reasons why we do this work, why we're doing this book study. It's peeling back layers.
I would say what the part you read, Jill, reminds me of the quote I've seen recently by several activists, and with everything going on, that says no peace before justice. So like don't expect, and also I think no civility before justice. So like not expecting, right, like niceness if we're not actually doing the work. Like forget that. No, we're going to cause trouble until we actually, yeah, talk about what's real and what needs to be talked about. So I hear that as atonement.
Can I read the paragraph right before that one, Jill? Because that one just like, so the professional rebel was a younger person who was invited to conferences primarily. So this is like a native person, an Indian person, right? Primarily to recite the wrongs of the white man, the real issue of the last century, never the current white man. Then the idea was that we could make the white feel guilty. When he felt guilty, it would somehow make his efforts more real, and then he was happy again. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Wow. That just like blew my circuits.
It's all about relieving that pressure valve for us as white. I mean, it's still white centric. It's about relieving our pressure, our uncomfortableness. Yeah. As white people, if you're listening to this and not watching the recording, yes.
Well, Jason and I, before the class, we're talking for a different reason about just the if you believe or think something, then in white Western culture, then you've done it. Or were we talking about this in class or before? We were talking
before.
Okay, that's what I thought, right? So if you believe or think something, then that makes it real somehow. And so all of this is internal. Like whether I feel guilty or not, or I feel, oh, I feel better now. It's like, it's all internal, and it like has, there's nothing there. And I also have to say that Christianity, as much as I like understand I mean, especially hearing Vance talk about grace in the Lutheran Church, like I can really appreciate the power of that, and yet it's still internal. There's still a primary internal, right? And then this like separation of like faith and works. And that, I mean, that's where honestly, like that's where we got it wrong. Now, if you look at and you can say, well, that's not the fullness of Lutheran theology, and I would agree. It's not, it's a distortion, it's a oversimplification, but come on. Like, when do we get beyond simplification? Right? So, but for, from an Indigenous perspective, it's like, what does it matter what you think or believe? What do you do? Like, how are you living? Like that.
I mean, we set ourselves up for this by, when we talk about sin, we invariably are talking about something internal happening in me, not something happening between us.
Right. Right.
Well, is it even the way we talk about it? Like, I mean, I was raised Southern Baptist, so like I feel like there's kind of new to the Lutheran world, but we talk about like my faith, right? My personal relationship with Christ, it's all my. There's very little we. So I feel like there's something missing there too, in a big kind of way.
And isn't that part of that is the result of how we understand communion? I'm convinced a lot of people understand communion as I come to the altar not with you, but to meet Jesus. And yet the fact that you're there, that's fine. But I haven't come here to be with you. I've come here to be with Jesus. Where the original Pauline understanding was Christ is present because we share bread with one another. It's the sharing that is calls Christ to be with us, not my individual receiving.
Which kind of bring us back to that quote we read at the beginning every time from Bell Hooks that she wrote in All About Love. Rarely, if ever, are any of us healed in isolation. Healing is an act of communion.
100%. What John just said, I like to call that Christian magic, because right, if the caring about my siblings in our community isn't present, then how is that even there, right? The healing, the love,
It's just bread and juice or bread and wine.
Part of my response to how to respond to that is this so-called kiss of peace or the greeting of peace. But that's not a time when we simply say hello to one another. It's a time where we recognize the presence of Christ in one another.
Nice. Mm-hmm.
No, thanks, that's too hard. That makes me uncomfortable, or whatever people are telling themselves.
Well, when we think of how religion continues to be used, the comments on 199, they cooed with satisfaction to hear formerly fierce and feathered warriors relate how they had found the Lord and been brought out of their pagan darkness. I think of how much we have missed in theology, in all those pieces we're talking about, because that we, the church, the white folks, were couldn't see. Oh gosh, the incredible spirituality, those kind of things.
Are you all familiar with how the Russian missionaries missionized the people in Alaska did their work? It's very interesting. The first people that Russians that came into Alaska were trappers and furs who enslaved the interior natives they encountered. They were followed by monks who then protested to Catherine the Great, and Catherine the Great forbade the slavery. And as the monks came in contact with the various tribal peoples, first of all, they learned their language. Secondly, they learned the meaning of their celebrations. And they're, so they could sing their music, they understood their talk. And then they began to share their faith, using all the analogies that they had learned from what the peoples already believed. The tragedy came when the Russians sold Alaska to the United States. The first people from the United States that encountered the natives were from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, who also happened to be Protestant missionaries. And these people came in and said, take down those icons, stop dancing. And they would send pictures home of native people dressed in suits and ties and saying, these are the Christians. And if they had native costumes on, these are the pagans. So now if you go into Alaska and you encounter Christian Orthodox natives, they'll talk about, this is our religion. If you talk about various Protestant groups, they'll say that's white man's religion.
Earlier, we were talking about the difference in ways of warring, and I found that quote, so I just wanted to share that with you and read that. We were talking about how there was a certain degree of warring or like moving tribes from one area to another by other tribes prior to colonization. But this quote is really helpful in understanding the difference. So it says Indian warfare was oriented toward protection of food supply and courageous exploits. Sustained warfare to protect or control territory, which they could not settle, was inconceivable to most of the tribes. Killing others simply to rid the land of them was even more unthinkable. Thus, the white man's way of war was the deadly antithesis of the Indians.
What's the page on that? Oh, I see. You did
Yeah,
you
go
put
for
it in.
Yep.
Page 204 for the recording. I wonder, we just got a few minutes left. There was one question in the study guide that included this chapter. Throughout the book, Deloria discusses the mythological aspects of American history, not only in terms of the mythical Indians of stereotyped land, but also in the mythical generalities of what built this country and made it great. However, the author notes that both whites and Indians were buried under the weight of popular pseudo-history from page 202. What does he mean by this? And while American mythology serves to erase Indigenous peoples, how does it also cheat white people?
A related question that I have talked about with an Indigenous friend of mine has to do with I'll just make it personal. I am an invader of this land, and how can it be that I feel rooted to this land when it's not mine? It's that same tension as with the culture. What is our culture? And can we have culture without land? I think there was a quote in here about not being able to have culture without land. So it's a question.
Yeah, I want to think it might have been chapter 8 or chapter 7. That was fairly recent.
It was probably in my catch-up reading because I just finished chapter 8.
Alice, I really appreciate you bringing that to our discussion. I was in a meeting, and this whole week has been a blur for me, but we were in a meeting. Someone did a land acknowledgement, and people were invited to share their own land acknowledgement. And someone used the phrase, "where I live used to belong to," and then named, right? And then a little tiny bit of discussion arose about that's not really a verb that would have been attached to Indigenous peoples and the territory where they lived. They would not say they owned it or that it belonged to them. Maybe they stewarded the land, right? They were connected to that land, but belonged? I don't think so. And that's just so that ties a little bit to what Alice is bringing to the table, because I was just thinking about, I grew up in central Iowa, and thinking about when I traveled back to that state, and cross over the border, and it's just like all of a sudden all the trees disappear and you see the crops, kind of waving in the breeze, and that speaks to my heart. So I'm very connected, like my heart connects to that land, but it's different because I am an invader of that space. And yeah, it's a lot to ponder. I wish I had more to say, but someone take the baton and keep going, please.
Well, we're kind of like almost at time, a little beyond time.
I just want to say just a tiny bit about that. One of the things that I have said back to my Indigenous friend when we had this discussion was, the problem for me is that my roots theoretically are in Germany, and I have never happily related to that culture. The primary reason being that it is so warlike and so ugly to me. So it's an even bigger tension when you disavow your true land, theoretically true. I mean, really, theoretically, we're all products of Africa. So, it just goes on and on. Anyway, thank you.
But what you're bringing up here is when we finish the book, there's going to be some pieces I think we're going to want to just pull out to keep rehashing and finding other resources. So this should be one of them that, we have just conversation about, and maybe find someone who's got some good resources that we can wrestle with. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot to say at this point.
And unfortunately, we're on white time.
Yeah, but really, really good questions.
Yeah.
And a reminder too, I was just gonna say a reminder too that white people aren't the only people that are not on their land.
Yes.
Oh, I mean, most Indigenous people on Turtle Island are not on their land. They're in cities. They've already been moved, right? So they're on reservations that was either never there, I mean, like, right? River people were moved to Warm Springs, as far away from, right? So there's also that, well, connect with the land where you are first, and forever, and listen to that. And that's part of it. It's part of it. It's not the whole thing, but I think it's part of it. And we're not the only ones, right? Indigenous people have to do that too. Learn how to ask permission, learn how to be in relationship, learn how to, in this place. That's not this place. Yeah. Okay. We're at the point of saying, start this section no later than 10 minutes till. Sorry. So let's just go to the closing. Jason, do you want to start that? And
Yeah.
I'll do the links.
Yeah, that'd be great. So thank you all for showing up, for actively creating beloved community with us in this space with an objective of healing together. Because we got to do our work first, right? Before we try to offer healing to other people. Yeah. So we invite you to check the ELCA coaching event pages. We've added several more learning opportunities in the last couple of weeks. So since the email went out, I don't know if I'll mention all of them, but we do have some partnerships with the United Church of Christ is doing an event later today called Hope in a Time of Peril. So that might be of interest to people today. Our gathering next week is Creating Beloved Community, Nobody Journeys Alone. And next Thursday, we have a new event we're going to try called Shift Your Lens, Healing Your Stories, which we think might connect also to this Indigenous work we've been doing too. So if that is of interest to you, that registration is still open. We also have partnership with I always forget the name. Let me look it up real quick. The Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery is offering 2 modules every month. Module 1 and 2 of this month is decolonization and organizing for systems change. So those are coming up. And then we're back in this space the second Wednesday of October, which is the 8th for chapter 10.
What
I got
the
that.
URLs, various things you just named. Where are the URLs for the various things you
Solveig is putting them all in the chat, but elcacoaching.org, and there's an events tab, and all those are on there as well. Thank you, John.
And Jason, maybe we can send John a quick link via email just to that events page. So that's easy for
Okay.
him to find as well.
Okay.
do?
Okay. Well, I just want to thank you all so much for this really rich conversation. Smaller group, but really deep and reflective. And so really grateful for that. And as you leave here today, please remember that you are seen, that you are valued, that you are loved. So go in peace and holy agitation.
Assalamu alaikum.
That will cause some good trouble.
Wa alaikum
Right.
assalam.
Solveig, can I quote you on that blessing?
Oh, yes, absolutely. You don't
I'm
even-
eventually going to be removed from the congregation I'm in right now, so I might as well just keep at it. Yep. I love it.
Yeah, well, you don't even have to quote me, just use it. Unless it's helpful to quote me, and so it's somebody else's words, then go ahead.
Right. Okay. Hide behind your name. Okay. Thank you for
Whatever
that.
you need to do.
That protection. Yes. Thank you so much. This conversation can cause a crisis of faith. It really can. Just knowing everything that Christianity has been and connected to. So thank you for holding this space so we can continue to name what we know to be true and to heal. Thank you, friends.
Take good
God
care.
bless you.
Mhm.